Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into something darker than usual. Turn down the volume just a touch. Let the rain whisper against your window. And let the house settle around you. That subtle, electric hum of the power lines is the only sound you want to be paying attention to. We're going deep tonight, into the forgotten places beneath a town that tried to dry up and disappear. It's the kind of place where, if you hear knocking behind you, just ignore it. It's probably just a pipe, or maybe the neighbor's cat. Probably, what's the worst that could happen, right? So, before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you're brave enough to handle what's coming. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? And what time is it on your side of the world? It's always a comfort knowing we're all listening together. Now, turn off the lights. Maybe keep one candle burning. And let's begin tonight's haunting together. Section 1. You are Kai. Not quite 35, but you feel the weight of every year of it here in Ember Creek. You stepped into this town, looking for a place to finally put down roots, and all it gave you was a job in municipal lines maintenance. You think 34 isn't old, and intellectually, you're right. But this town has a way of aging you, doesn't it? When you walk into the old movie house on a Friday, the teenagers look at you as if you're a ghost, as if you've somehow strayed from the designated path of the youth. You always sit alone, second row from the back, seat 6. You don't chew popcorn. Instead, you find yourself carefully sipping a Coke, watching whatever action or horror movie the single screen plays. It's your quiet ritual. At the yard, they still call you Greenie. You started 5 years ago. 5 years of climbing down manholes and tracing cracked lines, yet somehow you're still the new guy. That's how small towns work. Once you're labeled, the label sticks. You've heard men far older than you still get called kid at the dusty little diner down the street. Your folks were farmers. Wheat and corn, acres of it, gold under the huge, unrelenting sky. But the rain, remember the rain. It whispered away slowly, one dry season bleeding into the next until you blinked. And the dust was thicker than any memory you had left. People sold off their land cheap and left. You stayed, trying to salvage a life from the dryness. And that's when Tech, the company that calls itself the solution, showed up. Big trucks, bigger promises, clean energy, economic rebirth. People smiled for the local paper when they broke ground on the hill above Lake Valence when you were just a boy of 13. Lake Valence, where families used to camp, fish, and light firecrackers on the 4th. Now it's just a chain link fence and a body of water that looks wrong. No one talks about the fish. No one mentions the color of the water. They just whisper about runoff. You still feel the pull of the land, though. Sometimes you see the rusted tractor in the old barn, its broken belt hanging like a snake skin. You leave it there, a quiet mark of respect for your father who used to treat that seat like a church pew every morning. Your mother moved on 2 towns away, saying the air was easier to breathe up there. You think she meant the people. You stayed. You bought a little trailer near an old pecan grove, more sticks than trees now. You keep it clean. You fix what breaks. You have Marble, a terrier mix bundle of scrappy loyalty that sleeps by your boots and barks at the wind. The life here is simple. It is not glamorous, but it is work. You wake at 6, drink coffee with powdered creamer, and drive your beat-up 99 Ranger with the busted stereo to the maintenance shed. The calls are routine. Root blockages, broken valves. rats chewing on wires. You know the sewers better than most people know their own houses. When you're down there, in the damp, cold quiet, sometimes you like it. It's the only place where nobody bothers you. No looks, no phones. You are just you and the dripping pipes. The Aerotech company gave you laminated maps, claiming the new system was high efficiency and flood resistant. But things don't line up. Tunnels go farther than they should. Dead ends aren't. You once found a concrete room down there, no doors, no pipes, just there. You earned just enough to keep gas in the truck, marble fed, and a movie ticket ready for Friday. That's the good, simple kind of life. At night, you sit on the steps of your trailer, drink a beer, and look up at the hill. The Aerotech factory hums. Bright white lights like a hospital and always on. The building is a big, windowless square. Trucks go in and out. You've worked the main lines right beneath it, and the smell down there changes. Some of the older guys swear they've heard voices through the pipes. You dismiss it. Pipes make noise, and your brain invents company when you're down there too long, but you can't deny. Something changed in this town after the rain left, or maybe it changed before, and you only saw it when you were dry and desperate. You remember a psychological study where test subjects were kept in complete darkness and silence for extended periods. Most reported auditory and visual hallucinations within days, their brains inventing company, just like down here in the tunnels. The mind abhors a vacuum. Researchers still argue whether the phenomenon proves the mind is self-sustaining or merely prone to error. You just know that sometimes the quiet down there is so deep it feels like pressure. And that pressure can make you see things. You're getting ahead of yourself again. This story is about the strangest job you ever pulled, about the day you can't forget. Let's start with the beginning of that day. You met Silas about 3 months into the job. He was your mentor, though it felt more like being partnered with a cranky, leather-faced uncle. Silas always smelled like a blend of cigarettes, motor oil, and cheap, sour candy. He wore the same frayed denim jacket, even when the heat was thick and heavy in July, and he carried a look in his eyes, like he was constantly wrestling with a memory, but he was the best worker you ever met. He knew every single bolt, every sharp turn in the system. Silas had been maintaining these lines long before Aerotech came along. He didn't like them much, said their city men smiled too wide and spoke too fast. Sometimes, Silas would launch into tangents about things like raccoons being government spies, or how carrots could turn your fingernails transparent. But then, just as quickly, he would pivot to serious, unforgettable advice. He'd tell you that the soft parts of the sewer near the eastern edge weren't structurally sound. Or he'd insist you always pack a honey bun to keep your blood sugar from crashing on a long, deep shift. Eat sugar when you're deep in. Your brain'll thank you. Sewers drain more than water, he'd say, the meaning vague, but the instruction absolute. You nodded the first time, not grasping the full meaning, but you never went down without a honey bun again. He showed you how to listen for the subtle strain in a pipe right before it bursts, how to measure heat against a wall to check for a hidden leak. And he gifted you the only boots that wouldn't soak through after 5 hours in standing water. Silas wasn't an easy man to like, but once the connection was made, it stuck. His conversation swung wildly, like a rusted gate, between hard truth and absolute nonsense. Yet if you stayed around him long enough, you found the rhythm, the wisdom buried in the madness. You could walk for hours through the tunnels, clearing clogs, barely speaking, and the silence would be comfortable. Then he'd break the quiet with something like, "You ever notice how the rats down here act like they own the damn place?" And you'd almost choke, laughing on your gum. Thursdays became a tradition, sitting behind the maintenance shed on old buckets, nursing cheap beer and trying to beat Silas at rummy. You never won fair. He always had a trick, usually a second deck he claimed was just helping the odds even out. He wore a thick, scratched-up G-Shock watch, the heavy rubbery kind built to survive a war. You once asked about it, flicking a card down, "Nice watch." He barely looked at it. "Gift from my boy. Lives up in Atlanta now," he'd said. When you asked if he'd ever gamble it, he just smiled that tight, dry smile. "Wouldn't ever part with it, not unless it got pried off my bones." You knew he meant it. "You get that sentimental about everything," you joked. He chuckled. "Yeah, having kids makes you soft." One night, during a pause, just the sound of cards and marble barking at the wind, you asked him, "Hey, ever think it's weird the Aerotech company doesn't sell anything? Not even a sticker." Silas didn't look up. "Hell, they probably never even seen a watermelon. Probably think it's a flavor of gum." You pressed, "What do you think they actually do in that place?" "Something secret, something quiet," he said. "That's when the raccoons show up." When you questioned him, he nodded, dead serious. "Government spies. I've said it before. You think they're digging through trash for scraps. Nah, they're downloading data through their whiskers." You just stared. "Right, and pigeons are drones." Silas frowned. "Now you're just being ridiculous." Silas felt like family. Not the holiday kind, but the kind you find in the dirt. The kind who shows up when your boots are full of water and the world's gone silent. He was the cranky uncle you needed, who wouldn't let you fall, but wouldn't coddle you either. Small towns work like that. You build connections in the silence between work and truth. He started to remind you of your own dad. The same quiet weight, the same no-nonsense attitude. And like your father, he'd get bashful if you ever said something kind. You wonder about the historical claims of spies using animals. During the Cold War, the CIA allegedly tried to turn cats into listening devices in Operation Acoustic Kitty. That endeavor failed miserably. But the idea of animals being repurposed as agents of information security is clearly not new. Maybe Silas wasn't as crazy as he sounded. Researchers still argue whether the sheer paranoia of the era created the stories, or if a few select, failed experiments were simply too strange for the public to believe. The thought of raccoons downloading data through their whiskers is absurd. Yet the feeling of being watched in this job is very real. Then came the job. You were both told about it during the usual morning meeting. A collapse had occurred deep in the interior system. It was one of the older, unused tunnels, sealed off for years. Aerotech sent word that the collapse had broken open something new, some forgotten chamber or corridor further down than the maps accounted for. They were vague, only saying they wanted it scouted. Probably they wanted to use it for storage, or maybe they just wanted to dig. You remember Ember Creek's gold rush history from the 1800s. Folks went mad with shovels and dynamite finding flakes in these hills. Most of it was long gone, mined out and forgotten. But the impulse, the greedy habit, dies slow. The higher-ups at Aerotech were always sniffing around for a way to turn a buck, even down here. You and Silas were chosen. Recon only, go down, take notes, snap a few photos, and report what you saw. Standard stuff, but in a territory further out than you usually went. But that morning, you woke up feeling rough, the absolute worst migraine of your life, a throbbing pain that fogged your vision. You sat on the edge of your bed, marble whining at your feet, and knew you couldn't do it. You called it in. Silas didn't say much when he heard your reason, just a grunt over the phone. Guess I'll do it solo. You offered to make it up to him to cover his next weekend shift. He shrugged it off. Bring beer Thursday and we'll call it even. That was it. The last conversation you ever had. Silas didn't come back that day. At first, the excuses flowed easily, fueled by a nervous, wishful desperation. Maybe he'd taken the long way around. Maybe he dropped his radio and was hiking the slow miles back to the surface. You'd be surprised how much people cling to wishful thinking when they don't want to believe something truly wrong has happened. But by sundown, the reality of it started to sink in. Silas was gone. They sent a team down into the shaft, 2 guys from a different crew and one of the Aerodtech safety officers. They had the ropes, the maps, the high-powered flashlights. They were down for a few hours, and when they came back up, they were pale and quiet. They didn't say much at all, only that they found nothing. No tools, no footprints, no Silas. That's when the panic started, but not the right kind. The corporate executives weren't worried about Silas, the man. They were worried about the headlines. Maintenance worker lost in tunnel collapse wasn't a good look for a corporation trying to appear clean and modern. You could hear the fear in their voices. In the forced way, they kept saying incident instead of disappearance. Small-town people hate attention. You like your problems local and your secrets buried. But the story still spread. You couldn't keep something like that quiet in a place like Ember Creek. People whispered about it at church and passed notes during bingo. Some suggested Silas had found something he shouldn't have. Others just shook their heads and called it a tragedy. But nobody, not really, believed the company's version. They ruled it an accident. They said the ground had shifted, that he must have fallen and gotten trapped. No body was recovered. The funeral was quick, quiet, and bare bones. They displayed one of his old, patched uniforms at the front of the chapel and framed a photo from his younger days. That's where you met his son. The one in Atlanta with the big tech job. He showed up in a crisp, gray suit, his tie too tight, his hands constantly fidgeting in his pockets. He looked around the dusty chapel like he didn't quite remember the place at all. You stood outside afterward, both holding terrible, watery coffee from the church kitchen. Neither of you cared how burnt it tasted. "He ever talk about me?" the son asked, staring hard at the gravel. "Every Thursday," you said. He gave a small, tight smile. The kind of smile people wear when they refuse to cry in public. You didn't say much more. He shook your hand, thanked you, got into his rental car, and drove away down the dirt road. You remember learning about the phantom limb phenomenon, where people still feel sensation or pain in a limb that's been amputated. It's the brain's inability to accept that something is truly gone. Silas's presence, the memory of his crankiness and wisdom, felt like that, a phantom mentor that should be here guiding you, but is only a sharp, painful absence. Researchers still argue whether phantom pain is purely neurological or an embodiment of psychological loss. You only know the absence is real. The next morning, you couldn't sleep. The shaft, the story, the complete lack of a body, it all felt wrong. Sila's was too smart, too careful. He wouldn't just disappear, and if he did, if something had happened down there, then a secret was being kept from everyone in Ember Creek. By noon, the unease had driven you out to the site. The shaft entrance was marked only by a line of faded caution tape, strung lazily between two traffic cones. That was Arid Tech's idea of security. No cameras, no guards, just a few warning signs and the corporate assumption that no one would be stupid enough to poke around. You stood at the edge, your boots scraping the dry dirt. The shaft opened beneath you, deep, dark, and utterly silent. You squinted down, not expecting to see anything, but the light caught a shape, tucked into the debris on the lower slope. Before you could talk yourself out of the utter lunacy of it, you started to climb down. Your foot slipped on a loose rock, and you caught yourself hard on the cold, damp wall. The smell hit you next, damp and sour, like meat left too long in the sun. You kept going. Halfway down, you saw it, a hand. It was sticking out from under a chunk of broken concrete and torn metal, gray, dirt-packed skin and fingernails. But it was the thing on the wrist that made your breath catch. The G-Shock watch. Scratched, worn, the same one you'd seen 100 times. The one Sila's always wore, even when he wasn't on shift. For a heart-stopping second, you wondered if your mind was failing you, if it was inventing this horror. But it was real. The second hand still ticked, slow and steady, indifferent to the fact that the man wearing it hadn't moved in weeks. You reached down carefully. You had to pry it loose. The fingers crunched a little when you shifted the wrist. You couldn't look at the face. You didn't. You took the watch and shoved it deep into your jacket pocket. Then you scrambled back up the shaft, kicking rocks and choking on dust. You sat in your Red Ranger afterward, staring blankly at the dashboard. When you got home, you laid the watch on your kitchen table, and it stared back. The numbers glowed in the sudden evening dark. You did the right thing. You reported what you found. An email to the site supervisor, calls to the main office, detailed voicemails and coordinates. No one called back, not a single word. You waited 2 agonizing days. Nothing. And that's when you knew. If you wanted answers, you weren't going to get them from some corporate rep in a button-down shirt. You packed your tools, flashlight, backup batteries. You laced up the pair of boot Sila's had given you, the ones that don't soak through. You tucked the G-Shock into your shirt pocket, the weight of it a cold, hard promise. You went down the next morning, before the sun had fully risen. You think about the folklore surrounding cursed objects, like the hands of glory. Supposedly a dried, mummified hand of a hanged man used by thieves to lock people in sleep. People believe such objects carry the malice and lingering will of the departed. Silas's watch, ticking on your table, felt like that, a relic carrying a dark, demanding purpose. Researchers still argue whether the psychological impact of believing in a curse can trigger real-world negative events, a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. But in this moment, you feel only the truth of the metal against your skin. You are going back down. You gear up just like you would for any other recon job. Tool belt tight, gloves ready, the heavy flashlight secured. A honey bun in your jacket pocket, a memory-fueled necessity, just like Sila's taught you, and his old G-Shock, heavy on your wrist, ticking steady. The shaft is quiet when you get there. Only the sound of your own boots scraping against the concrete. You climb down slowly, the flashlight beam cutting the thick darkness. The old tunnels are damp, as expected, but the atmosphere feels wrong. It's not just the smell or the staleness, it's something else. No rats. Let's be clear, rats and sewers belong together. It's a fundamental fact of the underground world, like how sunflowers are yellow, or how everyone secretly hates fruitcake. They are always there. You hear them, smell them, see them scurrying and scratching. Years on this job, and you've never had a shift without encountering at least one. But this time, nothing. Not a single squeak, not a shadow. Just empty pipes and silent puddles. You keep walking, the flashlight beam jittering, your boots echoing. Your breath is too loud in your own ears, and you grip the light tighter the deeper you go. 30 minutes pass, then a full hour. The air is cold, but you are sweating. That's when you find them. Bones. They aren't in piles, but scattered, like breadcrumbs dropped by something that had no need to clean up its trail. They are fresh, still stark white, with no signs of rot, no chewing, no gnawing. You crouch down and hold your light to the nearest one. A rat's skull, clean and sharp-edged. Next, a skunk. Its stripes are still visible on a thin layer of skin, not yet fallen away. Then a raccoon. Its tiny, clever hands are curled, like it died reaching for something just out of grasp. You stand slowly and back away. You're no wildlife expert, but you've seen enough roadkill and dead livestock to know how things are supposed to break down. These animals weren't decomposing right. And no alligator did this. Alligators bite, roll, and swallow whole. They don't strip a creature clean, like it's been picked apart with fingers. Besides, the water down here isn't deep enough, isn't wide enough for anything that size. The ground is smooth, still, too still. You keep moving deeper toward the coordinates where Sila's was last sent. The path dips lower than you expected, as if the entire tunnel is sloping toward something vast and unknown below. Eventually, the familiar brick and metal infrastructure ends. You step through a jagged gap in the collapsed wall, crouching slightly. Your boots meet a different kind of ground. It's no longer concrete. It's stone, carved, smooth stone. It looks less like a sewer and more like a cave system. The walls curve and coil, as if something immense dug it out, either with huge claws or with boring machines built for scraping the earth itself. Every inch of this new chamber is polished. No jagged edges, no broken rock, just long, sweeping tunnels stretching in directions that make no sense, like the work of badger moles. Like something that was never meant to be seen from the surface has been digging and living down here for a long, long time. Your flashlight beam catches strange grooves in the walls, lines that move like veins. Or perhaps like something massive has slid across them thousands of times, wearing the rock down. And the smell changes again. The sewage scent is gone, replaced by something that smells intensely like burnt iron. You recall the historical concept of the silent circle, or the wandering corpse in European folklore. A creature that supposedly leaves no trace, but for unnaturally clean bones or missing animals. These stories served to explain sudden disappearances that had no rational cause. Researchers still argue whether these were just early attempts to personify natural predators, or if the stories point to something genuinely unknown in the vast, unmapped underground. You only know that the sight of those stripped bones is a cold, hard fact. Then you hear it, a dragging sound. A slow, wet pull like something heavy and large is sliding across the polished stone floor, just out of sight. you instantly kill your light. You step behind a wide, jutting rock, a natural pillar in this vast, underground cathedral, and crouch low, pressing yourself against the stone. And then you see it. It slithers into view from the far end of the tunnel. It's pulling itself forward on long, thick, pale arms. The sight of it is an insult to nature. It looks impossibly like a human fetus. Huge. Wrong. Its head is massive and smooth, like a balloon stretched far too tight over bone. But it has a face, eyes that don't blink, a nose that is still, and a mouth that begins to stretch open. The mouth is the worst part. It stretches wide, impossibly wide, like it could swallow a full-grown man whole. The jaw unhinges like rubber, the pale skin pulling back to reveal a dark, endless maw. And it mumbles as it moves. The sounds are indistinct, barely audible, but one word cuts through the low, wet drag of its movement. Hungry, over and over. You stay perfectly still behind the rock. Your light is off. The creature is just around the bend now, maybe 10 feet away, maybe less. You can hear the awful dragging sound clearly. Every few seconds, it stops, the silence hanging heavy before it repeats the single, awful word. Hungry. Your knees are pressed hard into the cold stone. You are sweating through your shirt in the oppressive cold. Your back aches from holding this unnatural position for so long, but you don't move. You don't even shift your weight. You think about the sheer, unadulterated panic of running. If you left now, carefully, quietly, you could probably make it. You have the tunnels mapped in your head. You could find your way back to the surface. You could tell Arid Tech the collapse completely blocked everything off. Blame it on a sudden gas leak. Say you smelled something wrong and immediately turned around. It would be easy. It would be safer. But the thought won't settle. You try to picture yourself in your trailer that night, feeding marble, sitting on the steps, drinking a beer, watching the hospital bright lights of the factory hum on the hill, pretending nothing happened, pretending Silas didn't go down here because you called out sick. You know, deep in your gut, you would never sleep again. This town, dusty and quiet, never asked much of you. It let you stay when you had nowhere to go. It gave you work. It gave you space. But it has rules. Quiet, old rules. If you see something broken, you fix it. You help your neighbors. And most of all, you never, ever turn your back when you see something fundamentally wrong. Silas wouldn't have. He taught you how to listen to the pipes, how to measure depth by echo. He didn't deserve to end up as a hand with a ticking watch poking out of a pile of rocks. You think about the Mandela effect, the phenomenon where large groups of people share a false memory, like a collective sense that something should be one way. But the reality is fundamentally altered. In this town, the memory of Silas is already shifting, becoming a corporate footnote. You need to cement the truth of his loss. Researchers still argue whether the effect is a glitch in collective human memory or evidence of alternate timelines merging. You just know you can't let Silas become a ghost story before you even tell the truth. Your fingers trace the cold metal in your jacket pocket, the emergency flare, still sealed. You slide it into your palm and grip it tight. You remember something else Silas told you, maybe a year into the job. You were sitting behind the shed, drinking cheap, warm beer. He pointed vaguely up at the factory hill. There's gas pockets in the old tunnels, low areas. They'll never tell you where, but you'll smell them, he'd rasped. You smell something sharp. Don't light a cigarette. And if something ever goes wrong, well, Just remember they built this place to burn if it had to. You had smelled gas about 20 minutes ago, sharp and dry. It leaked out of a cracked pipe by a collapsed section, old metal, unsealed, with no airflow. It's still back there, you realize. It has to be. You shift your weight slowly and stand up behind the rock. Your flashlight is still clipped to your belt, dark. The thing, the hungry thing, is farther down the tunnel now. Still muttering, still dragging itself forward like it has no bones. It doesn't see you. You move, you walk fast, but meticulously quiet, keeping your steps even. You don't turn around. The cracked pipe is still leaking, the hiss a low sound only you can hear. The gas smell is stronger now. The air feels heavy and wrong, pressing on your lungs. You crouch beside the old pipe and twist the valve once more, not to close it, but to force it open. A loud, distinct hiss fills the tunnel, the sound echoing off the stone walls. You hear the dragging sound stop. The thing knows something is happening. The last thing you remember is stepping back, pulling the cap off the emergency flare just as the creature shuffles toward you. And then, everything goes black. You remember a folklore known as the Will-o'-the-Wisp, or Ignis Fatuus. Marsh lights said to lure travelers to their doom. But sometimes, they were believed to be the flames of flammable gases escaping the earth. Silas's advice about the tunnels being built to burn now feels less like wisdom and more like a desperate, final instruction. Researchers still argue whether the phenomena were purely methane gas igniting or a mix of gas and luminescence. But you only care that the gas is real and the fire is a necessary, terrifying tool. They found you face down in a drainage pool a few miles north of Ember Creek. Someone from one of the pump stations saw a shape bobbing near the grate and called it in. At first, they thought you were dead. Your shirt was half burned, your face caked in thick black ash. One of the paramedics later told you your eyes were wide open, just staring. You don't remember that part. You only remember the sequence. Fire, then rock, then black. You woke up 3 days later. Hospital bed, ribs taped tight, skin scrubbed raw. Marble was curled at your feet. For a long time, that was the only thing that mattered. A week passed before the Aerodtech company came knocking. They sent 3 suits. Not the local guys you see in the yard. These were smooth-faced outsiders. One held a clipboard, the other 2 sat silently, just watching you. They asked questions, what you saw, what you were doing down there, why you went past the marked collapse zone, and most importantly, how the explosion started. You listened, sipping the terrible hospital coffee they brought, and you told them you didn't remember. They asked again, quieter this time, one at a time, each voice trying to find a weak point. They offered hazard pay, then bonus pay, then legal immunity if you would just walk them through your shift that day. You shrugged. You told them you'd been sick. You said you must have slipped, hit your head. You said there must have been a gas leak they didn't know about. They didn't buy it, but they couldn't prove anything either. They didn't fire you. Maybe they thought you were some kind of hero. Maybe they just wanted to keep you close, under their careful, sterile thumb. Or maybe, just maybe, they already knew exactly what was down there. Silas used to joke about it. He'd say, they've got secrets in those tunnels. Some things are buried for a reason. You used to roll your eyes. Now, you know he might have been right. The Aerodtech company sealed off the collapsed section. They called it unstable, a danger to workers. Internal memo only. The town never heard a word. They replaced the access door with a heavy steel plate and a fresh, gleaming padlock, but you don't think they were worried about the safety of their workers. You think they were terrified of what almost got out. They wired you a hazard bonus, a check 3 times bigger than your annual salary. You spent exactly $32 of it. You bought Marble the good kibble, the expensive kind in shiny bags with too many vowels in the name. She licked the bowl clean and wagged her tail so hard she knocked it over. You didn't spend a dime on anything else. The rest of the money sits in the bank untouched. People in town, of course, started whispering. They said you must have seen something, that you came back, different. Someone at the diner asked if you'd found gold down there. You told them the truth. Nope, nothing worth finding, you said, but you still have Silas's watch. You wear it on your off days now, when you walk Marble around the pecan grove and the air gets still. You check the time even when you don't need to. It still works fine, still ticking like it always did. You think maybe you just like hearing something reliable. You still work the sewers. They offered you a desk job upstate. You said no. You told them you like it down here. And that part, strangely, is true. The tunnels are quiet. They are familiar. You know them better than you know most people. They don't lie to you. If a pipe bursts, it bursts. If something's leaking, you hear it. If you pay attention, they don't surprise you much. But you keep a few new rules now. You never go deeper than you have to. You always bring a second flare, just in case. And you always listen for the rats. Because if they are there, you know everything is fine. Simple as that. You recall the historical superstition known as the drowned man's hand, or the practice of placing a dead man's compass or watch in a grave to prevent him from wandering. You keep Silas's watch on your wrist, feeling the low, rhythmic tick, a tangible link to the man and the truth. Researchers still argue whether the origin of this superstition was genuine fear of the undead or simply a way to honor a loved one's final duty. But for you, the watch is a reminder, a promise kept. This is the first time you've talked about what you saw. If you've made it this far, you're one of those people who is curious about things, about dark places, forgotten paths, and the mysteries people don't talk about. Maybe you're the kind of person who walks past a locked door and wonders what's behind it. Maybe you've looked down a manhole cover and thought about climbing in. Don't, but if you ever do, if something drags you into a place that's older than maps and stranger than dirt, bring a lighter. And a honey bun. You're gonna need 'em. You are hyperware now. The world is a thin membrane over a deeper, colder truth when you drive your beat-up Ranger past the Aerodtech factory, the white, windowless square on the hill. You no longer see industry. You see a lid, a carefully constructed seal over something that breathes. The constant, electric hum that vibrates from the building is no longer the sound of clean energy. It sounds like a low-frequency cage, constantly energized, constantly running interference. The new crew guys, the ones who replaced Silas, are nervous. They don't know why, but they feel the shift in the air, the heavy silence the town now wears like a second skin. They complain about the maintenance yard being too quiet, about the way the wind only seems to blow when you aren't looking. You don't try to explain the missing rats. That's a secret you keep locked away. You've noticed that sometimes, when a pipe needs fixing near the old section, the water flowing out is unnaturally clear, almost sterile, before it mixes with the usual grime. Too clean, like it's been filtered by something hungry. One Tuesday, you're routing lines under the old city hall, a routine check for route ingress. You are deep, but not too deep. You remember Silas's warning about the soft parts of the sewer near the eastern edge. The air is muggy, the usual stink of old water and mildew. But then, a subtle, sweet scent cuts through it, sour candy. You stop instantly. It's the scent Silas always carried. You turn off your lamp. You stand there in the absolute dark, listening to the water trickle. The scent is faint, but unmistakable, clinging to the air like a ghost's handkerchief. You reach up, checking the steel beam above your head, running your gloved hand along the slick surface. Nothing, but when you pull your hand back, you see something on the glove, a small, dark smudge. You wipe it, and the sour candy smell intensifies, but the smudge is just motor oil. A mechanic stain, weeks old. Silas, you feel that sharp, phantom pain of loss again. He must have been here just hours before he went on that final recon mission. Maybe he'd stopped to rest, had a piece of his cheap candy, leaving a subconscious scent for you to find. You recall the historical superstition of the unquiet grave. The belief that if someone dies a violent or sudden death, their spirit is unable to rest and will leave psychic residues or lingering sensory impressions. A smell, a cold spot, an inexplicable sound. Researchers still argue whether these are genuine paranormal echoes or just the mind using sensory triggers to process unresolved trauma and guilt. You feel the weight of the latter, the guilt of being sick that day. You switch your lamp back on, the beam shaky. You turn your attention to the pipe itself. The metal is heavily corroded, but there's a fresh gouge near the base, about the size of a shovel head. It's not root damage, it's not age. It looks like a deliberate impact, as if someone was either trying to force their way through, or, more worryingly, trying to seal it shut in a panic. The gouge is too new to have come from the initial collapse. You run your finger over the metal, the rough edge sharp enough to cut you. It's a reminder. This is not just an old tunnel system. It's a battleground. And Silas was here, trying to fix something that was clearly beyond the usual wrench and bolt, the quiet weight he carried. Was it the burden of knowing this place was fundamentally wrong? You realize you need to see the maps again, not the corporate, laminated versions, but the real old ones that Silas kept hidden, the hand-drawn records that marked the places Eritech swore didn't exist. The sun sets in Ember Creek, painting the tunnel entrance a dull, sickly orange. You feel the pull to go deeper, a terrible curiosity that is slowly overriding your self-preservation instinct. You stand up, dusting off your boots. You have to find those maps. The official maps are useless, just sterile lines and corporate propaganda disguised as infrastructure planning. They tell you where the water should go, not where it does. You wait until late Thursday night, the night that used to be reserved for bad rummy and cheap beer. The maintenance shed is locked with a new, heavy-duty padlock, a subtle corporate reaction to the incident. You don't pick the lock, you remember the back wall. Silas showed you a section, disguised by a stack of old tires, that was never properly bolted into the concrete frame. He'd boasted it was an emergency escape route from when the shed used to be a speakeasy in the 50s. You pull back the tires, push the wall, and slip inside. The shed smells exactly as it always did: motor oil, stale coffee, and a faint, sweet overlay of sour candy from Silas's ghost. You go straight to his old locker, It's empty, scrubbed clean by the company, all his personal belongings gone. But you remember the advice he gave about hiding valuables. Never where they expect you to look. Silas wasn't sentimental about many things, but he was fiercely protective of his records. You check the bottom of his locker, pulling out the thin, perforated floor panel. Nothing. Then you check the ceiling, where the metal meets the roof. A perfect, dark square of oil-soaked rag is tucked into the joint. You pull it down. Inside the rag, tightly rolled, are the documents. Old, brittle parchment maps drawn in faded ink and meticulous pencil. They are the real maps of the pre-arid tech system. You lay them out under the harsh, bare, fluorescent bulb of the shed. They are covered in Silas's looping, cramped handwriting, and little coded notes. Soft spot here. Kid, watch this valve. Gov. Raccoons. And there, right under the factory, is a section marked with a large, angry X and a single word written in thick, red permanent marker. Void. The official Aeratech map showed this area as planned expansion. Future storage. Silas's map showed it as an empty space, a huge subterranean chamber that predated the town's system. A concrete room with no doors, no pipes, but there's a small, new notation in the red void. A tiny arrow pointing from the old, collapsed tunnel straight into the chamber. Beside it, a single, sharp sketch of a stylized fetus. Your blood runs cold. You recall the eerie fact of the Dyatlov Pass incident, where a group of experienced hikers mysteriously died in the Russian mountains. Some found with internal injuries, but no external wounds, and an inexplicable orange tan coloring to their skin. The Soviet investigation was quick and ruled it a compelling natural force. The Aeratech investigation of Silas was also quick, ruled an incident caused by a ground shift. Researchers still argue whether it was a natural avalanche, a rare sonic weapon, or a truly unknown element of the territory. You only see the pattern of official denial and quick closure. You copy the coordinates from Silas's map, the precise latitude and longitude of the void chamber. This is the chamber the collapse opened. This is where the thing that calls itself hungry lives. You feel a sudden pressure on your chest, a sense of being watched from the dark corners of the maintenance shed. It's that old, familiar feeling of quiet dread this town gives you. You grab the maps and slip back out the hidden panel, leaving the tires exactly where you found them. You know where you have to go. You know what you have to do. You've been back down dozens of times since the blast, but you never ventured past the safe, familiar sections. Now you're tracing the route from Silas's map. You are methodical, a man of routine, checking the flow, listening for the strain, and constantly, always, listening for the rats. Their absence is the single most terrifying sound in the world. You navigate the old, bricked-up tunnels where the air is still and smells like stagnant history. You find the spot where the old system meets the new, right above the coordinates for the void chamber. It is exactly as you remember: the jagged hole in the wall, the end of the metal pipes, and the start of the polished stone catacombs. You feel a cold dread as you step from the man-made tunnel onto the carved floor. The burnt iron smell is strong, almost metallic in your mouth. You use your high-powered light, sweeping the beam across the sweeping, coiling walls. The strange, vein-like grooves are everywhere. You realize they aren't wear patterns. They are tracks. The creature is not just passing through, it is living here. You move slowly, your boots barely whispering on the stone. You are looking for an entrance to the deeper chamber, the void itself. Silas's map showed a secondary, small access point, sealed by a weak bulkhead. You find it, a heavy, reinforced metal door, clearly installed by Aerodtech after they noticed the chamber. But the steel is buckled, scraped. A massive, deep crescent is scored into the metal, as if a plow tried to rip it open. You check your kit. 2 flares this time, and a honey bun. The ticking of Silas's G-Shock on your wrist is loud in the silence, a fragile reminder of time that the monster down here clearly doesn't heed. You hear the sound again. The dragging, wet, slow, and sickeningly close. You instantly drop to your belly, flattening yourself into a shallow recess in the stone floor. You kill the light. The air thickens. You don't dare breathe. The sound gets closer. The heavy, sliding rhythm of its movement vibrating through the stone. You can feel the cold radiating off the creature before you can see it. It passes directly over the mouth of the recess you're hiding in. You see its pale, fetid underside, skin stretched taut over massive muscle. The sound of its arms pulling its grotesque weight across the stone is a terrible, wet slap slide. And then you hear it, not a mumble this time, but a sharp, wet inhale, and a sound like sandpaper rubbing raw. It's right above you. Smell, sweet. It's the honey bun. The sugar, the refined sweetness, the thing Silas told you to eat to keep your brain from crashing, the very thing that would keep you alive is now betraying you. You feel a droplet of cold, viscous liquid hit your cheek. You don't move. You remember the old superstition of the night hag or sleep paralysis, where an invisible presence sits on your chest, stealing your breath and making you completely immobile. The intense pressure, the inability to move, and the presence of something unseen but felt are all classic signs. Researchers still argue whether sleep paralysis is a simple REM sleep disorder, or if there's a subtle, objective energy drain during the episodes. You are experiencing that immobility now, but you know this presence is anything but subtle. The dragging sound resumes, slow, wet, moving away from you. Hungry, lost the smell. It is moving into the void chamber. You realize you have to get that entrance sealed. You wait a full 5 minutes after the dragging sound completely fades before you move. Every muscle is screaming in protest. You slowly, carefully, stand up. The liquid on your cheek feels like cold, stale sap. You move to the buckled bulkhead. The steel door is massive, but the hinges are old, and the latch mechanism has clearly been broken by sheer force. This is the access point to the void chamber, the room Aerodtech wanted to use for storage. You know the creature is in there now, feeding, resting, or just waiting. You see what Silas must have done. He didn't just disappear in a cave-in. He found this thing and likely tried to seal the exit with his bare hands and whatever tools he had. The gouge you saw earlier on the pipe near the surface, that was him trying to create an emergency release valve, hoping to ignite the gas at the collapsed site and seal the whole lower section. You reach into your pack and pull out the only thing you have that could seal this: industrial-grade polymer resin. It's meant for quick pipe fixes, a temporary sealant that cures hard as rock in minutes. It's not meant for a massive steel bulkhead, but it's all you have. You start to work, applying the thick, sickeningly sweet-smelling resin into the scraped, broken latch mechanism and around the edges of the buckled door. You work with a quiet urgency, knowing the creature's simple mind won't keep it occupied for long. You remember the folklore of the golem, a creature of clay animated by ritual or a word of truth that can only be stopped by removing the animating word. The thing in the chamber is animated by a single word, hungry. It's a base, desperate need, and you are currently sealing its pantry. As you work, you hear a sound from inside the chamber. Not dragging, but a low, rhythmic thump. Thump, thump. It's hitting the steel door from the inside. The sound is getting louder. Thump, thump. You speed up, your hands slick with the resin. You need 5 minutes for a full cure. You have maybe 2. You recall the eerie fact of Latta, or jumping Frenchman of Maine syndrome, a rare cultural disorder where individuals exhibit exaggerated startle responses, often mimicking the person who startled them or performing involuntary commands. The thumping is a deliberate provocation, trying to startle you into breaking your concentration, into making a mistake. Researchers still argue whether it is a genetic neurological disorder or a form of behavioral conditioning. You just know you can't let it win the psychological game. You finish the seal, smearing the last of the resin into the deep crescent mark. It's rough, sloppy, but it'll hold for a few minutes. You back away, your heart hammering against your ribs. The thumping stops. Then you hear the low, wet, furious sound of the creature trying to scrape the soft, curring resin away with its long, thick hands. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The sound of a monster realizing it's being locked in its own basement. The scraping turns into a high-pitched, wet screech. The sound is pure, unadulterated rage, reflecting off the polished stone walls. A sound that should not be possible from something that looks like a giant fetus. The bulkhead is holding for now, the resin tacky and curring, but the steel is shuddering under the creature's desperate strength. You move, backtracking toward the old, bricked-up tunnel entrance. You have to get out now. The plan is simple and terrifying. Find the gas leak you used to escape before. Ignite the entire old section, and cause a controlled collapse that will bury the void chamber entrance under tons of rubble. You reach the transition zone, the jagged hole in the wall. As you step back onto the concrete floor of the sewer line, you hear a new sound from the chamber, the sound of tearing metal. The resin is breaking. You run now, the sound of your boots echoing desperately in the tunnels. You don't look back. You only think of the dry, sharp smell of the gas, the cracked pipe, the one Silas used as his last warning. You find the pipe. The gas is still leaking, the air thick with the smell of old fuel. It's stronger than before. You crouch down, pulling out the first flare. Your hands are shaking so badly you almost drop it. You think of the old myth of the Gorgon, a monster so terrible that looking upon it turns a man to stone. You didn't turn to stone, but you are paralyzed by the fear of what you saw. And you know that if you don't act now, the creature will make it to the main lines. The sound of the bulkhead ripping open is an enormous crunch. You hear the creature drag itself into the man-made tunnel. It's wet, heavy bulk hitting the floor. It's moving fast now. You pull the cap off the flare. The striking mechanism clicks, and the flare hisses to life, a blinding, intensely hot column of red light. You throw it with all your might down the tunnel toward the creature's sound. The air catches instantly. The gas, the trapped methane, the perfect mixture of fuel and oxygen. It ignites with a sound that is less a boom and more a sudden, colossal WHUMPH. The heat is instantaneous. a searing wave of air that hits you like a physical force. The tunnel walls immediately crack and buckle. You feel yourself being lifted, thrown backward by the force of the blast and the subsequent cave-in. You remember the feeling of your head hitting the pipe wall, the smell of ash, and then, mercifully, blackness. You recall the eerie fact that spontaneous human combustion is often dismissed as a myth. But it has been an unexplained phenomenon for centuries, where a body is reduced to ash, but the surrounding environment is curiously untouched by the flames. The sudden, violent fire you ignited feels like a controlled, reverse version of that myth. A focused, unnatural conflagration to solve an unnatural problem. Researchers still argue whether the phenomenon is real, or if it's simply a mix of forensic misinterpretation and historical exaggeration. You only know the heat was real, and it bought the town a desperate silence. When you wake, the world is muted, gray. You are in a sterile clinic room far from Ember Creek. The only thing that feels real is the low, rhythmic pressure on your feet. Marble, curled up, breathing. It takes a week for the corporate representatives to find you. They are the same 3 suits. They stand by your bed, clipboard ready, their faces carefully blank. They start the interrogation again, soft-spoken but relentless. What did you see? Why were you there? They offer the hazard pay again, the money. They try the soft sell. We understand that you must have been disoriented. Just confirm the gas leak. They try the hard sell. You entered a sealed, unstable zone. This could be viewed as sabotage. You meet their eyes and sip your cold, bad hospital coffee. You tell them the same thing. I was sick. I must have slipped and hit my head. The collapse, it must have ruptured a gas line. You stick to the narrative of the injured worker. They press, offering the huge sum of money for the truth. You shake your head. I don't remember the blast. I woke up in the pool. The one with the clipboard sighs, a small, frustrated sound that reveals his true worry, liability. They can't prove you did anything deliberate. They can't prove you saw anything. Your story is conveniently, stubbornly, simple. They don't fire you. They pay you the bonus, the enormous sum, wiring it directly to your bank account. Maybe they are hoping the money will buy your silence. Maybe they want to keep you under their eye. You take the money. You only spend enough to buy marble the good kibble, the shiny bags with the complicated names. The rest sits there, a quiet, unspent treasure. You return to Ember Creek a week later. The Aerotech factory hums on the hill, lights blazing, indifferent to the cost of its silent operations. You go back to work. The town notices the change. They whisper at the diner, not asking if you found gold, but asking if you found peace. You tell them, nothing worth finding. You still work the lines. They offered the desk job again. You refused. You need the tunnels. They don't lie. You need the feeling of knowing exactly where you are and what is around you. But now, you live by the new rules. You never go deeper than you have to. You always bring the second flare. And you listen for the rats. You live by the absence of the hungry thing. A quiet, simple terror. You recall the historical concept of the Stockholm Syndrome, where a captive develops a psychological alliance with their captor as a survival strategy. While you are not technically a captive, your return to the tunnels, to the source of your trauma, feels like a dark kind of dependence. You need to be close to the threat to know it's contained. Researchers still argue whether the syndrome is a genuine psychological defense mechanism or simply a coping strategy for extreme duress. You only know the tunnels are the only place that makes sense now. The sealed section is now marked by a steel plate and a massive, fresh padlock. You see it every time you work the eastern lines. It's a perfect, neat corporate solution to a primordial problem. A steel door over a screaming void. You know the creature is in there. Or maybe, with the blast, it was buried forever. But the quiet is too perfect for true peace. You wear Silas's G-Shock on your off days now. It ticks steady, a reliable rhythm in a world that lost its beat. You trace the deep scratches on the glass, each one a testament to Silas's quiet weight. The watch is your anchor. It's the final, tangible truth that can't be bought or written away by a corporate memo. You pull out the old brass compass you took from Silas's locker before the suits cleaned it out. It's dented and scratched, the needle stuck permanently pointing southeast, toward the hill where the Aerodtech factory hums. It's a permanent warning. The truth is always in that direction. You still see his son sometimes, when he comes back to visit his mother. He looks at the factory on the hill with a clean, detached curiosity, seeing only industry where you see a hungry, sealed secret. You never tell him what really happened. The truth, you realize, is not always a gift. It can be a terrible, unshakable burden. You walk marble around the pecan grove. The trees are still more sticks than leaves. Marble sniffs the wind, her scrappy little body tense. She barks, a sharp, nervous sound, not at a raccoon or a squirrel, but at the quiet hum from the hill. She knows. You remember the quiet rule of the town, the one Silas embodied. You fix what's broken. You didn't fix the creature, but you contained it. You buried the secret beneath fire and rock. The last thing you do every night before turning off the light is listen for the rats. They are the canary in your coal mine. If they are there, scratching and scurrying, then the ecosystem is whole, and the hungry thing is still sealed away. If the silence ever falls again, you know you'll be down there, flare in hand. You think about the concept of subterranean loneliness, a psychological state where prolonged exposure to dark, enclosed spaces triggers profound existential dread. You embrace that loneliness now. It is the price of keeping the secret, the cost of the quiet life you have built on the thin surface of Ember Creek. You are the first in your family to not work the land. You work the dirt beneath the land. You guard the dark. You are the maintenance worker of the quiet. You are Kai, and the ticking watch on your wrist is the only company you truly trust. The hum from the factory is just the sound of a very large machine running. It's power production, clean energy. It's supposed to be a comfort, right? Don't let the shadows play tricks on you. The stories we tell in the dark are just stories. They help us process the day, the things we think we saw but didn't. When you look at the manhole cover tomorrow, you'll see a simple municipal utility access point, nothing more. Thank you for spending this night with me, for walking through those cold, wet tunnels and carrying the quiet weight of Kai's story. It's time to turn your lights back up, stretch your legs, and remember the comfort of the familiar. Don't worry about the floor creaking. That's just the old house settling. It's just the house. Get some rest. Sleep peacefully if you can. It's just the house.